Hello everyone, welcome to our med school app timelines and expectations. My name is Jenna and I will be co-hosting our presentation tonight along with our resident expert Anita. Before we kick off our webinar, let's cover a few housekeeping items. Just so you know, everyone's lines are muted, so if you have a question or if there's something you'd like to share with us, please use the question box located in your GoToWebinar menu bar. Also, we will do our best to get through everyone's questions tonight, but if we are unable to answer yours, one of our experts will follow up with you after the webinar. Additionally, tonight's session is being recorded, so there's no need to take notes. Each of you will be receiving a copy of the recording after the webinar, so sit back and enjoy the presentation. Without any further ado, I'm passing this over to Anita. You might be muted.
Hey guys, how you doing? I am muted, so you would like to actually hear me. So let me fill you in on a little bit about who we are and where we are, and this is actually me. I'm here in North Carolina. I'm actually on the coast near Wilmington, and it's nice here. I can't complain. And here's Jenna, stuck right here in the middle of the country. All right, so this is me. So today we're really going to be spending a lot of time talking about getting ready for the next application cycle or the cycles in the future. So let me tell you a little bit about myself. So I've actually been doing this for well over 15 years. I've worked at the medical admissions and the undergraduate advising level and here at Princeton Review. Over this time, I've actually counseled over 10,000 applicants. That's a lot. It means I'm kind of old as dirt. The truth is that I actually was the former director of health advising at an R1D1 institution, and I've also worked in medical admissions. I have a medical degree from UNC Chapel Hill, and I also have PhDs in physiology and pharmacology, and I did a master's in education. Don't worry, do not be impressed. I didn't want to get a job. But the key thing about that is I've been exactly where you guys are. So I really want to talk to you about how you get prepared for the next application cycle, but more importantly, how you start to think about who you are. Because having been connected on that side, I get an idea of what we're looking at and what we've heard, okay? So let's talk a little bit. I'm going to give you kind of an overview of what we see on an applicants on a day-to-day basis, give you some advice about how to best position yourself and how I, Princeton Review, and other resources can actually help you out. By the way, if you haven't already taken your MCAT, we're actually currently offering $200 off any MCAT class if you enroll by October 26th. All that pre-Christmas got me thinking. All right, so the first thing we want to do before we get started is I want to kind of find out where all of you guys are at. So if you could help me to get me some idea of when you are planning to apply. So have you already applied? Are you getting ready to apply in the upcoming cycle? Or are you applying the next year? So have you already applied? So that's for in 2017 for 18. Are you planning on applying 2018 for 2019? Or looking in the future cycles? So let me know sort of where you guys are. Okay, if you've already applied, part of the tips will help you guys thinking about where you are and how you will prepare for your interviews, but I see the majority of you guys are getting ready to apply in the upcoming cycles. So this will be really important for you guys. Okay. So baseline screening parameters, I get this mess all the time, okay, because everybody's about the number. What's the GPA? What's the MCAT I need? So what you need to know is there are baseline screening parameters, but more importantly, the numbers of people that you're up against. This is one of the biggest things that I get all the time because as a general rule, when you're working with pre-health students, you guys are already brighter than a lot of the people that you work with. You work really hard, you make really good grades. And so the people around you are always kind of going, wow, look how smart you are. Look at the good grades. Look at all the things you're involved in. But when you're going into this league with other medical school applicants, you're competing against people who've been doing the same things. So sort of what are the baselines? So the average admitting GPA, so the average person accepted to med school has a GPA of around 3.65 to 3.75. Now that's pretty darn impressive. But there's also something you need to keep in mind when you're thinking about this, okay? 365, 375, that probably means, oh yeah, it does. That means that that person didn't make an A in every single class. Okay, so guys, if you make a B, if you make a C, it doesn't mean that your med school path is over, okay? One C, one B never kept anybody out of med school, but the overall profile of who you are as an applicant is important. I will tell you that we do look at upward trends. A lot of times people will have kind of a hiccup in the beginning and they do better as they go along. But I get people who get so preoccupied with, I only took 12 hours last semester. I only took 6 hours. I only took 17. I'm going to show you why. In the scheme of things, we're looking at the overall picture. You've got to look at your trend and you've got to look where you come out. So the average admitting GPA is a 3.65 to a 3.75. Does that mean if you got a 3.5 you're not getting in? Heck no. Does that mean if you got a 4.0 and a glossy little GPA you're guaranteed? Absolutely not, because there's so much more that plays into that. All right, the average MCAT score. We all know this as a general rule, and we kind of say 508 to 510, 509. It's kind of what you're shooting for. It's the old 30. Basically, that's in the 80th percentile. So if you're figuring where you want to shoot for, this is kind of what you guys are going on. But let's look at more the overall, okay? So overall, what we're seeing is this trend that year by year by year, the number of applicants is increasing. Okay, so last year, we had almost 53,000 applicants to medical school. 21% of those folks matriculated. Okay, look at this, guys. We're looking at like 40% acceptance rates and matriculation rates. That means more people don't get in than do get in. And if you look here, the average, the mean applicant MCAT was about 501, and that's about the 50th percentile. Whereas the mean is about that 508.7, close to the 509. Okay, again, the same thing. So how do you make yourself stand out? So what you need to understand is that schools are going to get an average of anywhere from 5,000 to 15,000 applications. They can't screen those by hand. They're using electronic screens. So the first thing they're going to do is screen on key parameters, that MCAT score and that GPA. And I get people all the time who say to me, but I've done so many other things. And you're right, and that really is important, and that's really strong. But if those two scores are going to get you through your first screen, you need to have the thing to get in through the door. The other thing that we've seen is that a strong MCAT score tends to override a GPA that is slightly under. I'm not talking about way under, but slightly under the average. But a poor MCAT score kills the best GPA. So an MCAT score below like a 504 weighs very, very heavily on a 4.0 GPA. A lot of people ask, when should I take the MCAT? And one of the things you need to think about is that we're looking at you thinking you've spent 3 to 4 years preparing for this moment. Okay, you should be ready to test for the MCAT within 5 to 6 months at least of when you want to apply. So if you want to apply in June, no later than April. The reason is you need to be able to get a score back to be able to say, do I need to retest, do I not? I get people all the time who go, I wasn't ready, school overwhelmed me. Then that's fine. If you're not ready, be willing to take a gap year. Be willing to look at where you are. But we're going to talk about the deadlines and the timelines for what you should be thinking about and how things roll in a rolling admission system. So that's a little highlight of where we are to come. So getting into med school, this is the first thing I need you guys to think about. And for those of you guys who are joining me a little bit later, my name is Dr. Anita Paschal. And actually, my name used to be Dr. Anita Pardue. I got married last Friday. So you may see my name as both Paschal and Pardue, but I prefer that you just call me Anita. My background is I've been doing this for over 15 years, and I now work with Princeton Review, helping mentor people get to med school, get to grad school, whatever your dream is. But I want you to think about moving from college to grad school to med school, like going from college athletics to getting into a pro sport. Okay, think about the high school athlete who is really, really good. That was you when you were in high school. You were the smart kid and you knew you were going to get into college. And in college, you even were excelling in the field of where you were, like that college quarterback. You were sort of standing out amongst everybody else. But there are so few people who get that additional nod to go to the pros, to get that acceptance to med school. You've got to find the keys and the things that are going to make you stand out. And that's what we're going to talk about. Because for those of you who are looking at applying next year, we know that the application cycle opens in June, but you guys really need to start preparing in November and December. That's what I'm going to talk to you about tonight. So let's go back to the screening credentials. What I told you was that your base screen, because of the number of applicants that are going to come through that line, that base screen is going to determine a lot of times how they're going to look at you when they give you your secondary and after. We'll talk about that in a second. So minimum requirements. Remember we said these are our averages. The averages is 3.5 to a 3.65 to a 3.75. We do see people who are getting in this lower range, but really this is what you're looking for to make your screening criteria. If you guys are slightly below that and you have a strong MCAT, then you can still look at those types of programs. What we generally say is that you want your reach school should be about 2 to 3 points above your median MCAT score and their median MCAT score. This is a big issue because I get a lot of kids who go, but their range was, and you're right. But if you're really going to target it on your key schools, remembering that the average applicant applies to 7 to 15 programs, my average is about 20, you've got to figure out where do you fall on that spectrum. Okay, so if you're figuring that your minimum requirements are going to be at least a 3.3, and ideally I say if you're a 3.45 or below, you might want to think about adding grad level coursework before you apply. We're going to talk a little bit about being a reapplicant later on. Your MCAT score. We generally say that a 508 to a 509 is going to get you through most screens. A 512 kind of makes a school kind of take a breath. Feels sort of like they may be solid. And a 516, a 518 is where you really start to turn some heads. So these are going to be your two baseline credentials. This is a big mistake other people make. They'll come to me with a 4.0 and a 515, a 518 MCAT score. They really haven't done anything else. I had a student last year with a 4.0 and a 522. She did not receive a single interview. And the reason was these next things here. Basically no hours of clinical experience. So if you're going to make it through a screen, okay, let's say you're that college athlete who's got really stellar marks and you get offered a training camp, they're going to want to see how you perform. What else do you bring to the table? So things like having solid clinical experience, which we'll talk more about, remembering that diversity, different areas of shadowing is better than quantity, meaning I'd rather see someone with 100 hours in 3 to 5 areas than 600 hours in one discipline. Okay, and paid clinical experience, especially if you do a gap year, really holds a lot of clout. Now, what if you're not in this area? Now, one of the times we'll typically say, think about taking a gap year. I know you guys act like you're a hamster on a freaking treadmill. You went all through high school. You excelled. You've gone all through college. You see the 4 years of med school and the residency that are backing you up. And it's like, but I don't want to take any time off. I got so much I need to do. Well, take it from an old fart like me, okay? 1 year in comparison to the whole rest of your lifetime could mean everything, okay? Showing a school that you're ready and you're prepared, can mean everything. Because if you apply because you say, I just want the schools to really know I care, and you don't get in, then you become a reapplicant. Okay, typically reapplicant standards are going to be higher. We're going to see that you've done the things to fix the reasons you didn't get in the first time, and if you haven't, it's even a bigger mark against you. Be prepared, know what you bring to the table, but more importantly, be realistic about what you're up against. Okay, think about what it would mean to take one additional year versus something you're going to be doing for the rest of your life. I've never had a single person take a gap year or a glide year that did not thank me at the end of it. Now, what if you don't want to take an additional year? You don't want to get paid clinical experience, or maybe you don't want to invest 1 or 2 additional years in getting a master's degree. If your GPA and your MCAT score fall below a lot of these medians, you can apply MD, but if you want to get in that year, I encourage you to either think about getting a master's or looking at applying to osteopathic. Now, a lot of people get a lot of concerns about osteopathic medicine, and I am the first person here to tell you it is so amazing, because a couple of things. Number one, osteopathic physicians get all the training of an MD, plus they get additional training in holistic medicine and manipulation. The other thing is residency programs used to be designated osteopathic or MD programs. Now our residency programs are under a charge to review both MD and DO applicants. So it opens the field up for even that more residency programs. So before you're faced with an MCAT score or a GPA that you may not like, do your homework now. There is actually a website called Doctors.do where you can find out all about osteopathic medicine and start doing that now. The other option, especially if your GPA is lower below a 3.25 in an MCAT, think about Caribbean programs. Look at the Big Six in the Caribbean, programs that are established with high residency placement. I have kids of mine who I've worked with who actually attended Caribbean med schools who are doing surgical rotations at Duke, at Stanford, at Davis, at high-level residency programs. One of the things you guys need to understand is that ultimately your residency placement is going to depend on your board scores and your clinical letter rotations. So if you end up looking at a Caribbean school, just make sure that you'll do the clinical rotations here in the US. Look at their board passage rates, because that is going to determine your success in residency. Okay, so those are our base screening. Let's talk about what you're going to need to apply. All right, so unlike students, gap years can strengthen your application. So like I've already insinuated that. What does one do in a gap year? I get this question all the time. It's what's your week on? Duh. Wake up, look at your application. If your GPA is low, then look at 1 or 2 year science-based master's programs. On the medical admissions side, if your GPA is low, we're looking for you to prove to us that you can do graduate level work in the sciences. Don't go get, not that they're not beneficial for you, but an MBA or even sometimes an MHA is great for your future practice. It's not great for us knowing that you can do science level coursework. So when you're looking at grad level programs, look at the number of hours that they offer and look at the concentrations in science-based master's coursework. That's what you really, really want to focus on. All right, so look at the programs, consult with us. The other thing is that you need to know that you need to complete at least 1 year of science-based coursework before you want to apply. A lot of kids will tell me, but I'm getting ready to apply this year. I'm going to start my master's, but I want to apply anyway. How are we supposed to know how you're going to do? We don't have a crystal ball. We have no GPA. You need to present to us at least 1 level of grad level coursework so we can see how you're performing. It's okay to take a gap year. All right, so you're going to apply in June. Typical what we see is people are just struggling to get through the spring, get through their classes, maybe take their MCAT. But guys, if you're planning on applying in June, you need to be thinking now, starting next month. I start working with my applicants in November to January. I want you to look at these key timeline points and think about where you're going to be for the next year, because this is a year to a year and a half of a journey. I'm dealing with students right now who applied with me in June who are freaking out if they haven't gotten interviews or they haven't gotten acceptance. You need to buckle up for a full year-long journey. This is not a sprint, okay? So the first thing is, right now, November to January, I know we're in October, trust me, okay? You want to start thinking about and brainstorming your personal statement. I've got all kinds of tips and thoughts we're going to come up on in a minute, but you should start brainstorming. Now, I get this all the freaking time. Will you please help me with my personal statement? I don't know what to write. Well, if you don't know what to write, I sure as heck don't know what you need to write. So the first thing you need to do is step way back from your personal statement. You need to think about who you are, why you want to be here, and why being a doctor is important to you. And I'm going to go ahead and tell you that if I hear one more time this week in an interview prep or interviews I'm conducting with med schools, I really want to help and serve people. My grandpa died and I want to make a difference. I really love science. I'm not all about the prestige. I want to make a difference in this world. Don't get me wrong, guys. Those are all such admirable characteristics. But if I hear them one more time, it's like, yeah, whatever. Prove it to me. So the very first and best step you can do before you write your personal statement is step back and get really in touch with yourself. I want you to dig deep within your soul, and I want you to figure out why medicine is important to you. I want you to think about the things that have happened to you throughout your life and over the past 4 years of college or high school that stand out in your head. I want you to sit down and I want you to make a list of the clinical things you've done, and then I want you to be reflective. I want you to think about a day that really made a difference to you. I want you to think about something you did service-wise that changed you as a person. I want you to think about how you took on a leadership role and you failed and how you got better, and be reflective of those in a personal statement. I don't want a personal statement that says, I'm empathetic. No, you shouldn't have to tell me how you are. It should radiate in your personal statement. I want to hear your journey. I don't want to hear the journey of your grandpa that died. And I don't want a personal statement of, I want to be a doctor, why I want to be a doctor. First of all, we're physicians. And secondly, it shouldn't be filled with I. It should reflect a journey that shows passion with compassion, with conviction. So start outlining it. Start thinking about who you are as an applicant, because we're going to be looking at how you're going to be with your patients and what you bring to the table, what you're going to bring to our class. Do we want you here? Also be thinking about your letters of recommendation. As a general rule, we want you to have at least 2 science and 1 non-science letter. You can acquire those anytime along this journey. If your school has a review committee, a health professions review committee that puts together a packet of letters, I strongly encourage you to use that, because if you don't use it, it's an automatic red flag to us. Okay, if you don't, or if you've missed their deadline, I encourage you to look at one of the letter housing institutions like Interfolio or Virtual Evals, not to promote those companies, but because they allow you to get letters and hold them in a holding place until you need to transfer them to AMCAS or AACOMAS or to Texas, okay? And if you need to reapply, they're there. Think about your future. Think about where you're going to be. Start meeting with people to request letters of recommendation. And before we go on, let me give you a hint about requesting a letter, because I get this all the time. I actually got one this week. Somebody who was in my class when I was still Dr. Pardue, and it was like, I was in your class back a few years ago. I need to know when you were. Tell me I was in your class fall of 2013. I earned such and such in your class. I'll look you up, but I need to know. I'm applying for medical school. Here are 6 key things about me. I don't want to know you're empathetic, caring, compassionate. Everybody could BS that, right? I want to know I've been involved in clinical shadowing for X number of years. Another thing that I do is I work with students on developing what we call an applicant strength profile. Know who you are. Know how you're going to apply. But if you give it to me, I want you to stand on the other side and say, if this professor came to me and said, write a letter of recommendation about me, would you be able to do it? What kind of things would you ask for to be able to do that? Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit more about your personal statement and your experiences, but you should start brainstorming now over Christmas break, start outlining who you are and where you want to be. And then February to March, you want to revise your personal statement and start drafting your 15 experiences. Guys, this is a huge checkpoint. We're going to talk about your experiences here in a few minutes, but if you start detailing out important things you've done and you're struggling to come up with 15, or if to make your 15 you have to list every honor society or every person you shadowed, you may not be ready, okay? Because you're going up against people who are struggling to limit their 15 experiences. All right, of your 15, you're going to get to list 3 most meaningful, where you're going to go from 700 characters for 15 experiences to getting an extra 1,325. What are you going to write about? Typically, the average person puts at least one of those as a clinical experience, but what's most meaningful? I get kids all the time who go, could you tell me what my most meaningful should be? How the heck am I supposed to know what was most important to you? It should radiate through what you write. By April, you should have your personal statement finalized. You give your letter of recommenders an April 30th deadline because most of them are going to be late. That'll allow you to get those in May and June. And your experiences activities should be finalized because all 3 major application services open in May for keying your information. So in May, you can actually submit an application to Texas and to osteopathic programs, and starting in June, you can submit your primary application to AMCAS. You want to be ready. You want to have an MCAT taken, if at all possible, by April. So if you get a score in May and you need to retest, you can still submit in June, knowing what your test score is and that you're going to be retesting. If you test in May, you need to wait until you get your test score back before you submit your primary. The reason being is you need to be able to let these people know whether or not you will be retesting. All right? So we've got you written, we've got you finalized, we've got you submitted. Typically, if you're submitting in June, it's going to take anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks to get your application verified by AMCAS. By the way, as soon as you get your grades in May, you need to send your transcript from every school you've attended, as well as any college AP credit, to your application services so that they can start verifying all this information. Now, the end of June, AMCAS is going to release to any school you applied to. Key thing here, you don't have to have all your letters in, and you can add schools after you submit. So at least have your core list in. They will release the end of June, and July, my kids freak out because all of a sudden they start getting secondaries. And this is something else I struggle with because kids spend months writing their personal statement, and they're like, I'm going to apply to just any school that'll get me in. That is probably one of the most frustrating things in the world to me. If you spend more time evaluating your daggone sneakers than whether or not you're going to go to where you're going to go to med school, be thoughtful about it. Think about where you want to be. Think about how much it costs. Think about how realistic it is. Think about that the average med school automatically sends out a secondary if you apply to them. No screening, no nothing. About 85 to 90% of schools automatically send out secondaries. So just because you get a secondary doesn't mean they've even looked at you. but they will take your money and they will take your essays in. So if the average school sends 3 to 4 essays and you apply to 20 schools, guys, you're looking at 60 to 80 essays. And we tell you we want you to turn those back in 2 to 3 weeks. I don't care, it's your summer break. That's daggone hard to do. So keep all of this in mind. Be thoughtful about your application. Most schools will start offering interviews in August and they will run through January. Please be very, very careful of websites that are always talking about, and there's one that we all know out there. It's a certain .net where a lot of students spend a lot of time on. Really, really good for secondary and for interview questions. Not so good for information about what's going on. I had somebody email me this day that said, I was on this particular website and one of the students said the school had given out all their interviews and had already offered over 150 acceptances. Guys, the first day to accept was October 16th. Do you really think they've handed out all their acceptances? No. Be realistic. The average interview time runs August through January. There are schools that interview into February and March. Most schools do not fill their classes until January and February, and then people come off and on the wait list. Okay, I get this big question all the time now. When do I send an update? I get kids all the time who submitted their application in June and they want to send an update in August and September. How much different can you be between June and August and September? Not very much. I just want them to know I'm still interested. Average school gets 10,000 applications. If every one of you little suckers out there send a letter to us, we'd never get anybody interviewed. So the general idea is in November to December, if you have not heard from a school regarding an interview, it is an appropriate time to send an update or a letter of continued interest. If you have been accepted and waitlisted, that is a good time to send a letter of intent. Sorry, real quickly, to say that you're still interested. This is what I see time after time after time. Students start working on that personal statement after they get out of school in May. You do not draft that sucker out in a week and a half. That is not the kind of personal statement we want to read. Or they get caught up on their personal statement, so they miss submitting in June, and they're in July and August. Guys, remember rolling admissions. You fall further and further and further down in the pile. Be the first one at the gate. Think about it like you guys want to see the new Star Wars movie. You got to be the first person in line with the money to pay to get in. You may be at the back of the line and have money to get in, but they may be sold out. Or you may get a seat, but you may be sitting in the back row. It may not be your choice. You've spent 3 to 4 years getting here. Be on time. All right, so we're going to use the rest of our time to talk about the different parts of your application. So application season runs generally June to, well, open for King in April, submission in June, unless you're Texas and Nokomis, that's in May. But it will run through April 30th of the following year. By April 30th, you have to pick and designate a single school. You can hold applications you can hold spots at multiple schools, but by April 30th, you got to let them go. So primary application, you will finalize school and complete your AMCAS, hopefully in June, start keying in May, ideally submit in June. The regular deadlines, if you look at AMCAS, stretch into November and December. This is strongly discouraged to us. That means you did not have your act together. Secondary applications will start coming out most often between July and August. You should shoot for 2 to 3 turnaround unless otherwise specified. Pace yourself, create a priority grid. Schools you would most like to attend, schools with deadlines, or schools where you feel like you have the best shot. Please, please, please be careful. A lot of these essays are similar. I'll have lots of students who will copy and paste between these. You have got to be careful. I have at least once a week a student who goes, oh my goodness, I included the name or a program because I copied and pasted. We see it all the time, but it also gives us an indication of what you're doing. My first kids got interview invites in July, started interviewing as early as August. Osteopathic and podiatry programs can start accepting in August and September. MD programs cannot start accepting until October. I get this a lot. Should I apply early decision? I strongly discourage early decision. You have to submit by August 1st. They will let you know by October 15th. I always say, if you're good enough to get in early decision, you're going to get in regular application. But if you don't, you hold up all your other applications until October 15th, you're going to be a day late and $1 short. Don't look like the gunner who has to get in. And oftentimes I get this with students who go, I just really, really want to go to one of the schools that I work with. And I'm like, do you want to be a doctor or do you want to come here? Be realistic about where you are. And like I said, in November, December, you send letters of continued interest to schools you haven't heard from, letters of intent for where you may be waitlisted at. First acceptances for MD come out in October. Final decisions are due by April 30th. All right, so let me give you some overview of things you want to write in the different areas. So the main parts of your primary, outside of information, outside of transcripts, are your personal statement and your experiences, okay? So the key thing we're looking for is some idea of why you want to be a doctor without you saying, I really want to be a doctor. The things that are going to make you unique while avoiding, like I said, the cliches. I know you all love science. I know your granddad died, or he always wanted you to be a doctor, or how you want to help and serve other people. We hear that over and over. We want to make you stand out, that when I read it, I remember you, okay? So, sorry. When we're talking about personal statements, let me give you a few tips. You want to think about your personal statement in 5 paragraphs. First paragraph should be something about you, okay? A catch, something that catches you, that keeps your attention, like a cliffhanger. Walking Dead is getting ready to come back out on Sunday. You know, you see the cliffhangers. If any of you guys watch it, it's how they end it that makes you want to watch that next episode. Your next 3 to 4 paragraphs should each individually highlight some unique thing about you. You want at least 1 to 2 of those paragraphs to share a story. And I get people all the time who go, but I don't have any really crazy memorable experience. I didn't have cancer. I didn't save a life. Yeah, most of you haven't, okay? I'm going to give you a story that one of my students shared. She got her EMT one summer, and to put herself through school, she was actually working as a child care provider. She worked at a daycare after school. And she had just finished up her EMT, and I was reading her personal statement, and she's telling this story like she spent a lot of time going, I got to be a doctor. I got to get clinical experience. And then she realized one day that really wasn't what it was all about, because she was sitting there thinking about her application, little kid swinging on a swing. She was supervising her, and as little kids would do, little kid jumped out of a swing. She skins both her knees. So she's got the typical injury, or she's like bleeding from her knees. And she said, I was so excited because I ran and I got my first aid kit, and I dropped down on the ground in front of her, and I ripped open my first aid kit and opened the alcohol swab and got ready to stick it on her knee. And she said she looked up and there was a look of sheer terror in this little kid's face. And she said, well, I really suck as a physician already, because all she was thinking about was being a doctor and treating her patient. She completely forgot that that patient was a person. She said she set her alcohol swab down. She looked at the little girl and she said, what happened here? You got a boo-boo. You want to help me fix it? I want to go to med school. And she said she let her open her own swab. She helped her clean her own wound and put on the Band-Aid. And the little girl hugged her and she said, I want to be a doctor just like you someday. And she ran up to her mom and she said, Mommy, Mommy, we got to play doctor today. And the girl looked at her mom and said, not that kind of doctor. But she said when she left that day, she had such a different understanding that she was going to get an opportunity on a journey, not about curing diseases, not about fixing all the patients in the world or saving her granddad or whatever, but about developing relationships with people. And that person had a mom. That person was scared, and she needed to stop and breathe. And honestly, just stopping and talking to the little girl was so much more than any treatment she administered. When I tell you I want you guys to sit down and dig in your gut and figure out why you're doing this, you need to be able to relate those stories to me so I get it. And I get that you really get what this is about. All right, now in addition to your personal statement, you're going to get to pick out 15 most meaningful experiences. 15 experiences, 3 most meaningful. You get 700 characters in AMCAS. In AACOMAS, you're going to get 600. In the Texas, you're going to get 300. In AMCAS, you're actually given an additional 1325 in 3 what we call most meaningful. So here are your categories. So sit down now and think about, what are the things I've done and how will they fit? And a lot of times we'll tell you, group things together. So maybe you have unpaid clinical experience, okay? And you've got unpaid clinical experience in shadowing, okay? And you've shadowed for 400 hours in 20 different specialties. Don't list them separately. Put them in one heading of unpaid clinical shadowing. And then say, I've shadowed in 15 different disciplines, including blah, 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 for 300 hours. And then a reflection of what you learned from that. And please, if I read one more time, I did this. This will help me as a physician in the future. I will be a better physician because blah, blah, blah. It's dry. Let me show you how to write these out. So here are the categories you're going to get for formatting. We're going to ask you the type of experience from those categories, the name of the experience, how long you did it. We're not looking for high school things unless you started them in high school and they went to college. Grouping them together is going to give you more total hours and more length of time. If you're considering that more often than not we're screening these electronically, that's what you want for. The organization name can just be physician shadowing. When we're talking about a title, if you don't have one specific title, then it can be the lead person or your health advisor. And then your description, so important here, okay? It's how you format it out. Oftentimes people are trying to write really long, showy paragraphs. We need to be able to scan it to look for bullet points. The average reviewer is going to spend 2 to 5 minutes max on your application, more like 2.5 to 3.5. We're scanning for numbers and key points. So one statement about what it is and what you did and what you accomplished. Then use the rest of your characters. This is what we're looking for. Growth and how that applies for your future as a physician. We're looking for what did you get out of it. If it's research, which we're going to talk about in just a minute, we're going to talk about our categories. When people think about academic, break them down into research, TA and tutoring, studying abroad, honor societies. But it's not just what you did, it's what you learned from it. If you were a TA or a tutor, relate to me how you learned to read the differences between people and how those people conveyed those differences, okay? So for example, like my student who sat down with the little girl with the bleeding knees, how did she help her understand what was going on? Study abroad. It's great if you guys go abroad, but if you go abroad, you are putting yourself outside your comfort zone. It may not just be that you did a semester abroad. Maybe you traveled. Maybe you did a mission trip. Be reflective on it. Think about, okay, so when I landed, was I always totally confident and secure? No, I was scared to death. Okay, I remember the first time that I did a medical trip to Haiti and I got off the plane and I saw some of the people that were in front of me. I was scared to death. But by going through that experience, you learn that there are people who are different from you, who are just like you. And you learn to appreciate that you're not all that in a bag of chips, that they can share something with you. So each of these experiences should be reflective. If you do research, that's great, but I want to know what you learn. Research isn't about mixing together some potions and, you know, getting published. Research is about long hours in the lab where you failed, okay? What about clinical experiences? Okay, we do not expect you to be out there like Doctor Who, unzipping a chest and squeezing a heart and saving somebody back to life. But if you say you want to be a physician, I want to know why you want to be a physician other than you just want to help and serve people. Okay, if any of you guys who have known me or worked with me know that I lost my father 2 months ago. And I'm going to share a little bit of story about you, about how you think about being a physician and what happens in that life. So my father was 90 years old. He'd been married to my mother for 69 years, never spent a day apart. This particular day, he had a little cardiac arrhythmia that led him to a small stroke. He came to the ER that day scared and confused because he was an elderly gentleman who had done everything in his life, but over a year time frame had sort of started to feel his hearing start to go. His vision wasn't as good, but he was still pretty spry, but he was getting tired and he was scared. Okay, so that whole day people came in and out and different people treated him, and he got a CT and he got an MRI and he got other things. And at the end of the day, the physicians came in and they said, you know what, you're probably one of the healthiest elderly men we've ever seen. You had a little stroke. We're going to keep you here overnight. And he said, but I'm tired. I want to go home. And they said, no, we need to keep you here. And he said, well, can I talk to my wife? So they left the room. They'd worked with him all day. His family was there. My dad sat and he talked really closely to my mom. We didn't hear most of it, but he was telling her about how strong she was and how she could make it on her own. None of us knew what was coming. And that old man took his hands and he touched every centimeter of her face for like 5 minutes. And he looked at her and he kissed her and he told her he loved her. And he'd held her hand all day. But that man who had not moved on that gurney turned his back to her and he closed his eyes and he took his last breath and died. The physicians who had been tending to him that day ran in the room, dazed and confused. They couldn't figure it out. Family members, we stood there looking at him. Other family members who didn't make it there because we didn't see it coming didn't get to say goodbye. In the space of a day, clinicians had worked with him. And they looked at us and they said, we have no idea why this happened. My sister looked at him and said, yeah, we do. It's the power of human will. That you can work with somebody that as physicians over that day, they had developed a relationship with a man and a family and watched a life, watched scared and confused, thought they had things under control, and then watched the power of a human spirit let go because he was tired. And that day they walked out, and I'm sure that the shock of that impacted them, but they went home to their families. And then left behind in that room was not their patient, but it was a person. It was a person who was a member of a community that would never see him. It was a person who didn't get to say goodbye to his grandchildren, but also shared some of the most meaningful memories with a wife. As you go along this journey, take solace in understanding that we are gifted with the most incredible career in the world. A career where we get to share in people's lives, where we get to make a difference. Sometimes we can give people something back. Sometimes they will lose something. But along the way, we learn from every person that we work with along this journey. Think about the experiences you've had and how you've changed through what you've witnessed, and that every patient came in was not just there that day for that diagnosis, but everything else that was going on in that world. We are gifted with the most amazing career one could imagine. When you think about your service opportunities, we're looking for service opportunities that are typically carried on for a minimum 6 months to a year, where you've invested at least 50 hours on a continual, regular basis. And we're looking for things that put you outside your comfort zone, where not only you demonstrate selflessness, but for you to gain an understanding of the people that you're serving. I get people all the time who talk about, oh yeah, I fed the homeless, or I worked at the soup kitchen. And that's really, really great for the service you do. But in doing that service, did you gain some understanding of what life must be like for the people that you serve? Things we talk about, volunteering with hospice, and people say to me, but I don't want to talk to people who are getting ready to die. You have no idea what it means to be facing the end of your life and the concerns that come there. Maybe becoming a mentor with like the Boys and Girls Club or Big Brother, Big Sister, where you've gone through life and you've experienced things, but sometimes we meet 6, 7, 8-year-olds who've experienced things we can't even imagine, and they can make us better people. So when you write about your service, you should write about how you've changed through the service you've done. Also important in your experience is leadership. Okay, I don't care if you started a club. I don't care if you were the president of the pre-health club. I care about, did you learn how to lead? Okay, did you make a mistake and do better the next time? I guarantee none of you guys have been out there where you didn't take on a leadership position, and I guarantee everybody who wants to be some type of doctor has been clicking off the check boxes, and you were the treasurer or the secretary or whatever. I don't care if you were the president of the Mickey Mouse Club. What I care about is, did you learn anything from it? Because in your future practice, yes, you may be the doctor in charge, but you got to realize there are a whole bunch of people in your office making a difference. Okay, you got the front desk person who, if he feels like as the check-in person, he's not valued and he's pissing off the clients as they come in, they're going to carry that to you. And they're going to look at you and go, what kind of practice are you running? Okay, so are you the type of leader that can demonstrate that the people who are in your group trust you, but that they also feel that they have a role? Can you designate, but can you make people come together as an effective team? So when you talk about leadership, I want to show that you have growth and understanding there. All right. People often leave out social experiences, and I don't know how many times I talk to kids and I go, so what else do you do for fun? And they go, I just study and go to school, or I haven't had time to do anything because I study all the time. Okay, first of all, you're going to be taking care of people who are different and similar to you. I want to know if you're going to join our class, do you have an outlet? Because med school is super stressful. Okay, my son is a second-year med student, and he's got an exam tomorrow, and he's freaking out of his mind. Everybody does it, but you need an outlet. You know, for him, he goes to the gym, and he absolutely loves dogs. And so he's always scouring his neighborhood for anybody who has a dog, not to pick them up, but to play with them. Have an outlet. So I do yoga, okay? We love fishing. That's why we live on the coast, all right? What is your outlet so that you have some type of release, but also that you have some type of personality other than just being a bookworm? All right. Secondary applications, I told you, many or most schools automatically generate them. Set a timeline for yourself of 2 to 3 weeks to return them. If you're keeping in mind that 90% of schools are going to send you a secondary on a good year, if you aim to apply to 20 schools, you would shoot to get secondaries from 18. Getting interviews from 3 to 5 schools is a dang good year with a hope of 1 acceptance. Guys, this is not college where you all got in. This is med school. 40% of people are going to get accepted. Be realistic about who you are. Start preparing your base writing samples. There are websites that typically carry last year's secondary application questions. Start developing core essays, but don't pre-write everything because schools change. Be careful of copying and pasting. Check, recheck, recheck. Interviews. Guys, this is where more people bite the bullet on so many of these, okay? I have a whole series of helping you get ready for your interview prep. What you guys need to understand, it's not about the questions. It's how you present yourself. It starts with the way you're dressed. That's what I work with you on, how you present the right professional experience. You know, I see guys all the time in the black suit, the white shirt, and the red tie. You look like a bunch of freaking penguins. I look at girls who come in with a suit and skirt and pantyhose. Nobody wears pantyhose anymore. Okay, don't do that. I see girls with collared shirts, and collards are all over the place. You want a scoop neck shirt so everything's nice and in place. Yes, it matters. Be prepared in the way you dress. Be prepared in the way you present yourself. Make eye contact. Know how you prepare your answers. I need you guys to understand this. Interviews are the most important thing in the world to you. We hate you guys by the time of this interview season because we have heard so much of the same stuff over and over and over. We are looking for ways to remember you. So you need to figure out what your 3 to 5 selling points are. We talk about your applicant strengths. What's your strongest academic thing, be it research or tutoring? What's your strongest clinical attributes? What's your strongest service? Know them and be able to present them in a summary. Right before we finish, I'm going to give you an example of that. Review your application, research your medical school, and when you're done, send a thank you note. They should be concise, thanking them for their time, referencing something you talked about, and looking forward to speaking with them in the future, not why you want to go to their school. All right, beyond MD, we're going to talk a little bit about that, but because I've only got a few minutes left, I want to give you an example of what happened with a patient. Okay, so there was a patient who, it was the end of the day, it was the end of the morning. Lunch was supposed to start back at 1:30. So we're supposed to break for lunch at about 12:45. Lunch was from 12:45 to 1:30. It was 1:20, still seeing patients, get a message, hey, we're behind. I put a patient of yours in another room. It's like, oh, crap. I haven't written my notes, not going to get in, not going to have time to eat my lunch. Now I got to see another patient. So walk up to the door and it says insomnia. And I'm like, yes, I've got this. They can't sleep. I'm going to write them a sleeping pill. I'm going to get a sandwich. I'm going to make it. Walk in. It's, oh, I know you. How are you? I remember your wife had surgery, bariatric surgery for being overweight 2 weeks ago. How is she doing? Starting in, trying to be conversational. Yeah, that's actually why I'm here. So remember that her surgery, well, she had a pulmonary embolism and she died. Yeah, I'm feeling like a toadstool. All I was thinking about was my sandwich, didn't even think about the patient sitting in front of us. And he said, my son, who's 9, who had talked her into it, is severely depressed because he thinks he killed her. My 15-year-old son's run away from home because he can't deal with it, and I lost my job 3 days ago. Yeah, I was worried about eating a sandwich, and all I thought about was insomnia. I had no idea what was going on behind that patient. Think about who you are and how you're going to be prepared to reach every patient you work with. Okay, so if maybe your GPA and your test scores are not going to get you to where an MD application is, are you going to take a year off? Consider other options. What about osteopathic? Do your research now. It's awesome. It's everything an MD does in a whole other bag of tricks. What about a Caribbean education? Look at the kids I told you that I worked with last year, in the past few years, who are doing residencies at Stanford and Duke. Podiatry, the science of the foot, they don't go to med school. It's not the same residency. It's podiatry medical school, and it's great income. We'll take people with lower accolades. Get great surgery, great hours. Look at what your options. If you are going MD, PhD, you need to consider having at least 2 years of benchtop research. I know this is a whirlwind fast explanation of what your options are and what you need to do. You will be able to reference this back in the overview, but I want to see, because we are here to help you make your dreams come true. Princeton Review does test prep. You know we're great at that. We have online tutoring that'll help you get tutoring support 24/7. You crack open your physics book at 11:30 at night and you don't know what the heck you're doing, pick up the phone. We can get somebody to you. You need help on this journey. You want somebody who's been behind the scenes that knows how to get your personal statement and everything so you do stand out. That's what I'm here. Medical admissions. We've got it all, whatever you need. Let me help you though, because I really need to know if any of you guys would like to sort of continue on or let us get some feedback. If you would like more information about how to best prepare for the MCAT, prepping with prep stuff, how to navigate medical admissions, how I could help you, or how to boost your GPA with tutoring, just go down here so that one of us can actually reach out to you. We're actually offering 30-minute free consultations and to provide you with some information about where you are. So just let me know if you're interested in having somebody reach out to you, and we'll get right out to you. All right. I'm going to go ahead and close this poll because I do have an offer for all of you guys. But if you're interested, just let me know. All right. And also, just wanted to let you know that we do have some specials running right now. You saw that we have $200 off an MCAT prep class. Also, anybody who buys one of the Med Admissions Ultimate or Premium packages right now, we're giving 3 and 6 months of GPA booster tutoring for free. That's up to 2 hours a month of online tutoring where you get to talk with a real person 24/7 to help you out. Also, if you've already purchased an MCAT prep class, or if you purchase one, we can give additional deep discounts on any of these packages. So happy to talk to you guys about any of those. We have a few minutes left, so I'm going to go ahead, and if there are any questions, just turn it over to get some more information to touch base. I'm going to take 3 questions.
Okay. I'm going to start here at the beginning. I have one that says, do medical schools consider which undergraduate school your GPA is coming from? For example, certain schools are known for grade deflation. Is that considered?
Yeah, this is one of the things. Your baseline screening is going to be on your GPA and your test score. So we don't screen on specific schools. We actually, yes, a more prestigious school is going to hold clout, but that is actually not going to come until after or when we grant an interview or after we've granted an interview. And if we come to when we're at the committee level and we've got 2 kids who are very close and they maybe went to an Ivy League versus just a traditional school, but generally, if you've got strong credentials, you're going to get in anyway. So the weight of the notoriety of the school generally does not carry enough weight to outweigh really that prestige that comes behind it.
Great. Another one. How would you suggest is the best way to compile a list of schools that you would want to apply to? Would it be on GPA and MCAT scores?
Okay, this is actually really good. Like I talked about before, when you're comparing your schools, the first thing you need to do is go to the MSAR, the Medical Student Application Resource Book with AMCAS, and also, so there's a website called bestmedschools.com, and you can actually search by state. You can select by average MCAT, average GPA. So what you want to do is start with a base school. You want to, if you're looking at your MCAT, you should go for the median and go about 2 to 3 points max above that. A lot of kids will go for the full range. You've got to realize that's such a small percentage of what they post. So if you're building your base schools, you start with that and then you can go from there. MCAT's going to hold more weight over GPA. So if you have a stronger MCAT, you can go a little bit higher difference on the GPA. But if your GPA is high but your MCAT is lower, only go about 2 points above that MCAT. Build your base part of schools. Then go back and search, are they in or out of state? Look at the tuition. Build a grid. That's what I tell students. Create an Excel sheet and put all the key things, in or out of state, any special criteria for selecting out of state, tuition, and then I have my students do a summary of the reasons they would pick that specific school. Average is 7 to 15. Most of my schools apply to 20, students apply to 20 to 25. I will be honest with you, on the other side, when we see kids going 30 and 40, we're kind of like, are you desperate? Because if you're good enough to get into one of those schools, you likely don't need to apply to 60. If you need to apply to 60, you're probably not a strong enough applicant. Next question. I'll take one more because I know we're over time.
Yep. Last one. They're discussing GPA average and considerations if you are not a biology or health major. So if someone did electrical engineering, will that be taken into account regarding GPA requirements?
You know, again, this is the same type of scenario. We're really screening first line on total GPA, and science GPA holds a lot of weight. Okay, so like if you're a psych major or a chemical engineering major, or whatever, you're a different non-biology major, we're still going to screen baseline on science GPA and overall GPA. Again, it's generally when we're getting to offering interviews after we've gotten the secondary application. So you've got to make it through the screen. You've got to make it through the secondary criteria. And sometimes if they're offering an interview, they may give a little bit more weight to school or major, but you really have to get to that point. So like if you've got a 3.3 but you're in a super high intensity major, the problem is it's not going to make it through that base screen.
Great. Well, that's 3. I thank you very much, Anita, for taking time today to go over medical school applications and timelines. And then if we didn't get to your question tonight, don't worry. One of our experts will reach out after the webinar. And if you happen to think of any other questions, feel free to send us an email at questions@review.com. Thank you again.
And I want to thank you guys. Yeah, I want to thank you guys for your time. I know this is an exciting and intense time, and it's really, really overwhelming, but it's also exciting. I will tell you, it is so worth the journey. I've been there with you guys. I've been the one who was waiting to apply. I bombed my MCAT the first time I took it. It's so worth it on the end, and doing the job I do is the most rewarding thing in the world in helping you guys get there. It is just pace yourself and be patient. Thank you guys for your time. I hope to get to work with you in the future.